Meeting come to order. This is the special meeting of the Purdue Planning Commission. And why don't we start with the pledge of allegiance? Our latecomer can lead us in that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And justice for all.
Thank you. And
probably should acknowledge that Brian's who's absence again.
let's see, we have a vacancy. Lucas is no longer with us.
Right.
And Brian Dennis is not here.
Do we need a motion to excuse him?
Well, I make a motion not to excuse him. This is 2 times in a row and we haven't received notice.
So,
Huh?
okay,
Can I get a motion?
to not excuse him?
Yes,
Well, that seems harsh.
it does feel harsh.
What if? Okay.
So it's unexcused. You'd motion if he called in and said, I'm not coming in because X, Y, Z, and then you would motion to excuse him, but at this point, it's just unexcused absence. I think you need a motion for that.
The only problem I see is that if we all get together here and we did a quorum for business that we needed to take care of is kind of, how would you say, less sort of rude to put your other people out and not at least let us know what's going on.
Has anybody heard of somebody that wants to fill the vacant seat?
Well, I thought you had that.
I could go knock on his door, but.
Maybe we could put it out on Facebook too.
He's not having good.
Yeah.
I ain't doing it. We also can get Sherry to put it out on Facebook that we're looking for planning commission.
Hey, Brian, this is Steve Birch, at Planning Commission, which is where I'm sitting right now. And this is the second Planning Commission meeting in a row that you haven't attended and have not announced. Wondering if everything's okay with the family or if there's something going on that we need to know about.
Nicely done.
Okay, so we move forward. I'll turn it over to Todd. And we can get through this. Go.
Sounds like a good goal. Well, so the first thing up on tonight's agenda is the environmental element for the comprehensive plan. And this just kind of is, as I explained before, we're kind of doing the codes, and then I'm doing the this is all the policies and all the statements about those codes. Probably the most important section of this is all the way down in the goals and policies. I mean, you've all had this for a few days now anyway. I don't know if you've looked through it or if you want to go through each of these individually. I'm happy to go through as much detail as you'd all like, but I don't know, to me, this is not as critical as the code pieces that we're talking about because that's actually the regulations in place. So, and this should be a summary of what we've already talked about in those code pieces. So,
Yeah.
so as long as it looks okay, or if you had any comments or questions that you wanted to discuss specifically, like I said, I'm happy to go into more detail, but.
Well, I personally took it as a final draft of everything that we've been talking about from a growth management plan standpoint as far as.
Well, there'll be more on that.
Policies, so.
There's
far as this section is concerned, will seem to be
This is, yeah,
tidied up and ready to go.
hopefully it is.
Yeah.
I haven't made too many modifications to it. Other than what we had discussed, so.
So we should get into perhaps the codes.
Okay. So if we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. I'll use that as a final chapter for the environmental element. Step, I've taken our land development code. And now I've integrated the zoning code that we've discussed. I still have yet to integrate the critical areas pieces in there, but those will also get pulled into this, all those chapters that we're going through sequentially with ecological land services. As we finalize those, I'll begin to pull them in here as well. There were also a couple of other changes that, as I did a review of our plan, there are some other elements that needed to be modified to meet state compliance for some of the other pieces, and I've noted those in comments. So, I guess the first one of those is on page 8. And it's the symbol in the essential table. Well, this is just for consistency with what we've adopted there. So, I've edited the land development code to now include the symbols and uses that we have for the new zones that we've added, and the residential I've expanded. Of those. There is also a change on page 9. And that is under 3.02 permitted uses. Cities to allow up to 2 additional dwelling units. And also manufactured homes in all zones where they have single family homes. So I've added that to the R1 zone. And that's a state level requirement. With a note that we should probably add to our work plan at some point ADU code to
And we talked about those quite a lot, on at least one occasion, but I guess we didn't really do any nuts and bolts.
we didn't develop code. I think I presented a draft of what we had done for, was that the sign? We haven't actually worked on code. We've talked about ADUs. We have standards for them. So if somebody were to come in with one, we would just have to kind of wing it with the basic zoning standards now, you know, the basic setback.
Lot coverage and setbacks and so on. That's gonna take care. Would that apply?
Well, those do apply to ADUs. When we did that in Kalama, we kept them pretty basic. We said that they have to be similar in architectural design and materials to the existing structure, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
So that way they don't come up with something that's big. But then there's size in relation to the main dwelling and other things too. So well, I guess maybe the state does, but you probably don't. So what you do is you limit the size of the ADU to a certain percentage. There's a lot of things in there that are little tweaks. So it enhances, it goes beyond what you allow in zoning, but so far you haven't had a lot of ADU application. I mean, you already allow them, so.
But there is code about the amount of coverage allowed on
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah,
in our current codes, which we probably need to be discussed and modified potentially.
or not. Or
Well, I mean, that definitely slows.
whether it's inclusive or exclusive of an ADU.
Right.
You know, that those certainly apply too. But a lot of these, because you have to allow two, a lot of the communities will look at that and they'll say, well, only one can be a standalone external unit. The other one has to be attached or internal. So you're allowing 2 units per lot, but you're not allowing 2 external standalone ADUs per lot. So that way you're only allowed to have one. In order to get to 2, you have to do something that's inside the existing structure.
So is that
Structure.
something the state will allow us to regulate like that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that. I mean, that brings the whole focus and the idea behind granny quarters and parents' quarters and stuff like that, and that. Rather than just splitting a lot into building another house, or renting it out.
Yeah, and the state doesn't let you talk about granny quarters anymore. It doesn't make a difference if it's family or related or not. You just have to allow 2 residences. So you
Whether
can't.
you want living with you.
You can't regulate, the city can't regulate who lives with you on a lot anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be, some jurisdictions like Kalama used to have something in there saying you could only have a family member's residence on there. Well, the state says, nah, that doesn't fly.
Cowlitz County, yeah, and then you have to destroy it when the medical need
Goes
was
away.
gone, yeah, that's
Interesting. Yeah, so that's
Wow.
no longer compliant with state
right.
law. So. The other ad that is a bit of a pickle for a lot of folks is, this one is, see, it's on page 14 at the top of the page. It's under R2 medium density residential and also under R3 high density residential. Any place where you allow multifamily dwellings, you have to also allow permanent supportive, transitional, indoor emergency housing and shelters. And that is another state mandate. So in the multifamily zones where we allow multifamily housing, I've now added that. So that's in addition to the zoning code that we just developed.
Can you expound on that a little bit?
Halfway house.
Yeah, permanent supportive housing. So that is like transitional living or housing for individuals with disabilities or something else that need a permanent home. The transitional housing is when people are transitioning either through stages of their life and need more support or transitioning from homelessness into housing.
From prison. to housing.
And it's in the column in the footnote. It's House Bill 1220 that requires those. So the permanent supportive and transitional, and then the emergency housing and shelters is also just that. It's.
So we don't get to opt out of that.
I've tried to put the words in there exactly as they're in state law, no more, no less.
So who's gonna do it?
Well, if somebody wants to do it, it has to be allowed in your zoning code.
Right.
It doesn't mean that somebody,
Who's going to do it?
it would probably be the county or
Could be
a housing
private agent,
authority.
Private nonprofit that's got money.
It may be one of, I don't know, I mean. So churches might need to establish permanent supportive housing or transitional housing for people. I mean, it's just whoever in the community supports that need currently might be an applicant for this. And state law says you have to allow it any place you allow multifamily dwellings. They also say that you have to allow transient housing any place where you allow hotels or motels. So your commercial zone is now includes that as well. So that's the next change. But there's not a lot of flexibility there that I'm aware of. The thing, if you want to push it, we could not do it and then have the state come back and tell us you got to put these in. And then we'd have to say, okay, or we'd spend a lot of money in legal fees, I think, with the city attorney and the state Attorney General's office trying to figure out what we actually were required to do. But my thing is we'll put it in there, and then if it becomes an issue, then we can develop regulations that regulate how they occur in those zones. But you can't regulate them any more strictly than you do the multifamily housing or the hotels, motels. So that's why those get added in there. Like zoning, but the uses have to be allowed to. As I was. So I had to go through and. You know, Cindy provided a copy of this that had been converted. The PDF file that is our land development code. There is no Word document for that, so we had to. Well, there is now. So,
You're talking about, yeah, the land.
yeah. Errors throughout and formatting errors and other things. But so you had sent me a Word conversion file, but so I redid this. This is the work that I redid. As I was going through it, I noticed we had section 3.10, which didn't seem to have any content there, medical marijuana gardens. So it's in our current land development code. I don't know what you all want to do with that. It's a section in your land development code, and there's no. Marijuana regulations and a whole bunch of stuff down below. There's a lot of information there, but there's this kind of stray section that.
What is a collective garden of medical marijuana?
I don't know if there's a legal definition for that. I didn't look it up. If you would like to look it up, then I would suggest that that we add that to our to-do list and we come back and develop that section with regulations and others. I did not go through and reformat. The sections on marijuana are the document I got from Cindy. I didn't go through and fix the formatting and clean it all up and correct the.
Is that big, long section that we had?
All kinds of problems.
Collective gardens.
Yeah, it's medical marijuana collective gardens, and
And
it's
who regulates them, whether that's medical or not?
I don't, to me, it sounds like you're allowing people to make a community garden with medical marijuana, and everybody can just go, and this is great, this strain and that strain, and that's awesome. So,
Well, I'd be happy to down, but I think.
Yeah, so I.
Be rating it every night.
If. I mean, this will all be a recommendation for council adoption, and I'll have to highlight the changes in the code to them as well, but.
It's exactly what you guys think it is. It allows qualifying patients to collaboratively grow and share cannabis for medical use.
but where, in their home or?
These gardens were established and RCW permitting up to 10 patients to participate in a single garden with a collective limit of 45 plants or 72 ounces of usable cannabis. Each patient is required to provide valid documentation.
Oh, because there's a limit to how much you can grow as an individual.
Or your medical provider.
Right, okay, that makes sense. So they basically can grow a garden anywhere in their private property. But what allows them to do that is to have this collective of people who have the right documentation.
So they can get your numbers up, yes.
Got it. Okay. Well, I mean,
So that, I think, was defined further down in your marijuana code section in.
move it where it needs to go.
Well, I don't know what to do with this. I didn't want to alter the marijuana code because that's outside my scope. So like I said, I didn't even clean that up. I just.
It's already altered. Sorry, I was just.
Yeah. It's,
Do we need that?
no,
That.
no, this is not a. And your zoning code, so we can delete that line, or we can make a note to council that we feel like we need to develop that section. If it's not addressed elsewhere in your marijuana code, if there's a reason, I don't know why it was here. I didn't just delete the section, is my point. You know, when I was going through here, I did clean up editing and I cleaned up other things and I corrected some spelling errors, but I didn't. Those look like they were conversion errors, not actual spelling errors, but I did not change the content at all without asking you all. So that's why this section's flagged, is that it seems to be orphaned here. I don't think it belongs here, but
I mean, of all the things we're pushing back and saying we can always do later, I wonder if this is something that we can always do later.
I think,
so should we? Do we know if it's been addressed elsewhere in city code somewhere?
personally, I don't think it's a thing that should be formalized.
So just delete it,
That'd be my,
just remove it from here.
that'd be my.
Yeah,
And then if it is addressed in the marijuana code, which, like I said, I didn't really read that section.
it's 9.
And I just did a quick word search and collective gardens only appears in the table of contents in here, so. Just 2 times in this whole document, so it's not addressed elsewhere, so I will make a note that we're recommending council just delete that, what is it, apparently an orphaned header.
Yeah, unless there's some particular reason why that should be in there, and we can always reconsider it or whatever, so.
I would think that the hypothetical, medical marijuana patient would just grow their own if they were able to. I don't see what would be the advantage of a collective?
Oh, they can up the counts per person, so they can grow a lot more plants than an individual could.
You know, that law enforcement that checks all those things.
Okay.
And
Your plants haven't been counted lately, is that what you're saying?
I'm completely ignorant to this whole thing, so
You're gonna have to
you know.
do an infrared flyover here pretty soon.
So moving on, I'll note that we're recommending that we delete that orphan section in favor of relying on the more robust code down there. The mixed use zoning table, you can see for the waterfront mixed use and commercial mixed use, this is section 4.0, and this is on page 20. Indoor emergency housing and shelters, and I've made it a conditional use in the waterfront mixed use zone. Because, yeah, I guess because the motels are conditional. And then allow permanent supportive housing, yeah.
Well, there would be, there would be a compatibility issue there.
Well, so we can do that because motels are conditional uses, so. So that's the more restrictive process. It means it's gotta come before you all before it's not outright permitted without additional review and potential conditions, so.
Yeah.
So we're allowed to do that, and then also I did the same, allowed with a commercial use. In the mixed use commercial zone. Which is allowed because that is the apartment buildings are allowed with a commercial use, so. They're as restrictive as we can get with those in those 2 zones.
So the motels and support housing are a conditional use in commercial as well?
They're. Motels are, yes.
Okay.
So those are conditional uses, so that's why I was able to elevate them to the waterfront mixed use as conditional. State law says that you must permit them by the same process by which you permit those, so they're conditional uses, so that's exactly what we're doing.
And do you need to mention motels here at all, or no?
It's down below.
Oh, I see.
And emergency shelters, which are the transient overnight type shelters, and I added those as allowed in the mixed use zone. And as conditional in the waterfront mixed use zone. They have different standards that apply to those. So not the uses that We hope to develop in those zones, but certainly necessary ones to support a population of less fortunate individuals or people going through transitions in life, I guess. So let's see. Oh, yeah, so then. I just wanted to confirm, I went back and I looked at the record when I was developing the zoning code. But we did decide not to include the woodland urban interface overlay, right? That's the fire prevention stuff, and the fire chief was here, and I think he said that's probably not useful code for any sort of enforcement, so we're just not including it. We're not required to include it, but it is an optional element that we could include. So. So all of this is the zoning code that we've developed. It's now in here. And then melded together with your land development code. Let me see if there were any more changes that I had to make. Oh, I didn't edit the required improvements section for subdivisions. And the critical areas I haven't inserted that yet, so that's still the existing one from your existing code, so I didn't bother editing that or formatting or cleaning it up. We'll just replace it with the
Probably had that Word document on October 11th, 2024.
So then in the definitions in the bottom in section 2302, I just noted we don't have any standards for accessory dwelling units, we just define them.
What page are you on, Todd?
That page, I'm all the way down.
Flagging behind.
That was a big jump.
It was a big jump because I skipped over all the parts that I didn't change.
Okay.
Well, I didn't realize you could create an ADU within the dwelling. Not just, so in addition to attached, you could also just in the middle of it, you could create one.
Those are the three standard types of, the basic types of ADUs are either internal to a home, attached to a home, or completely detached.
Give me an example of how you would architect an internal ADU.
A basement.
Oh,
Okay.
That's good.
If you have a daylight basement with a second access, then you
Yeah.
block it off and you turn it into an apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on top.
Attics are another one. Sometimes you'll see a separate stairway going to an upstairs unit that's either an upper floor or an attic. Or barns. Barns are maybe harder because they're different structures, but maybe not. So that's ways of converting a piece of a structure. You can put a structure onto a structure as well, so that way you're just building it onto the side or adding on an extra depth to a building or something like that, making an ADU. And then, of course, there's the detached one that just sits in your yard in a different spot.
And as it stands now, our ADU zoning code falls back to the county and then state, or no?
Nope, you just don't have any regulations other than the basic zoning.
Oh, so I thought we had a max amount of square footage and all that sort of.
Your state, it's just city zoning, so if you're allowed to do 85% lot coverage in a commercials, or let's see, residential, I think you're 55 or 60% lot coverage. So if a home there now covers 30 or 40% of your lot, then your ADU couldn't bring that total to above the total allowable. Or if you have a bunch of structures there now with outbuildings that met the 60% coverage, then you couldn't put another building on it.
Gotcha, and if you have enough space, then you have a cap for the square footage at that point, and that would sort of constrain the size of the ADU.
We don't have those regulations now. So the only thing we have are the basic zoning standards. So you regulate in the residential zones, you regulate the building height, the lot coverage and setbacks is basically what you regulate. We do have some design guidelines now that we put in the residential zones.
Yeah.
So we worked on those and we developed those from pieces of the Ridgefield code.
So someone could technically put in an ADU that's 3,000 square feet right now, is what we're saying.
As long as it didn't bring the total lot coverage out of compliance, and as long as they could do that outside of their existing setbacks, then yes.
Wow, okay.
Yep, we don't say, there's nothing in our code that says it has to be smaller than the existing or anything.
If you've got one of the downtown 8,000 square foot lots, you certainly could.
On my permit tomorrow.
You could do two.
My application.
You could do two 3,000 square foot
That's-
ADUs.
That's a lot. Wow, I didn't realize that. So what do
Even
you,
though that Lewis County doesn't allow ADUs over, and I know city and county are different, but I know Lewis County doesn't allow them over 1,296 square feet.
I'm thinking of the handout for the ADUs that they
Yeah.
have.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't apply to us
It
then at
doesn't
all?
apply in city limits.
Okay,
I
No,
didn't know
county
that.
regulations don't apply unless we adopt them by. You just adopt the county's, say, county's code is now the city code, but council has to do that.
right.
So
What do you guys think about that?
I'm trying to imagine a situation where it would actually happen.
We do have a lot of requests coming in for ADUs right now, because there's some property that's being sold and, I mean, it's not gonna be a bunch of them, but a couple. And that's the information that I've given is just the lot coverage.
Yeah.
Yep, lot coverage and setbacks and height. You regulate all those, but
That's all we got right now.
It just seems to me like lot coverage and setbacks are gonna take care of really just about any problem that might come up. Unless,
if that works.
The total square footage,
Mhm.
ultimately, so I. Like, there's an explicit difference for some reason, otherwise you just have two main residences.
Right, and they have to
understanding
have
is-
an entrance, they have to have their own entrance.
That's right.
Well, that's Lewis County anyways, I know. I
But
think
my,
how it's-
my interpretation was always, and I've told other people this, that you can build an ADU larger than your original house.
Okay,
If you have the square footage.
In Toledo, that's true. In many jurisdictions, that's not true.
Right.
interesting.
But currently in Toledo, that is true. We don't really regulate anything. This code will go a step further and have design requirements for the residential buildings, but
could Kurt Redding's block be construed as a house?
but he could have.
Okay,
But then you don't really sell an ADU separately. You'd have to conduit or you'd have to subdivide that off into its own separate parcel in order to sell it separately, but that if you wanted to do 3 rental homes on a lot, then you could do the main residence and 2 ADUs. And in Toledo, that would be supportable as long as you met setbacks, height, and lot coverage requirements.
I'm just not seeing a problem, but maybe there's something I'm just, I'm not seeing, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so it's, if you got the 3, let's say you got 2 ADUs in a house, I mean, we get excise tax, right? So it takes a certain market for someone that's gonna buy a piece of property with 3 houses on it. I have a house and then I have an ADU in Lewis County on it, so it's 1,296 square feet. If I were to sell my house, it's gonna take a certain person that wants to come in and buy that property. I don't know that it necessarily property, we're still gonna get the revenue from water and sewer. The property taxes are. They go up, trust me, they go up when you have an ADU, but it's still less than if it was 3 houses. I don't know how much less, but
So if somebody brings a couple of single wides in and puts them on their property and there's sufficient square footage and they meet the height and the setback requirements. All of a sudden, you've got a neighbor now with a home and 2 single wides on their property.
But do they meet the architectural standards?
You have architectural standards in your yet to be adopted code, but hurry up and get your. State building code, and And mobile homes now will be specifically allowed in single family residential by the changes in state law.
We do have code on mobile homes though.
Do you?
Yeah, we went over that today and I'll send you that Word doc because we did our legal review for codification. So there's a big part of the land use codes that are in there. And like zoning and all that. So I don't know if that'll help you look at anything, but yeah, there's the mobile homes. And there was some stuff on ADUs, but I think it was just what was in
Yeah,
the
well,
land use.
it may be in your code. I've been waiting for that Word document to come through so I
Yeah.
can start to use some of that. But I think that too is a separate project. I mean, we have to get the comp plan and stuff done. But the other issue that you all have is you never, you did adopt your land development code into your city code by reference. But you didn't repeal the sections that were redundant to it in city code. So you still have a subdivision ordinance here and there.
Yeah,
You still have, so you have duplication of some of the standards in both places.
right. And so we're gonna use them to codify that and I can send you the Word doc. It's not a final, it's just still a draft.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, it does talk about, yeah, there's a lot of overlap in all of our code that. You know, to be cleaned up, but I can send you that today. I got that. But there is a whole section on mobile homes and. Which I thought was weird, cause it's,
Well, that's good.
yeah,
I remember working on those back in the 90s. The mobile home codes.
So if we can continue on down here, further in the definitions. You had a definition of family, which was no longer state compliant, so I deleted it. You'll see the addition with the modified version down below, so we're still defining family. But but you're an individual or two or more persons related by blood or marriage. A group of not more than 6 persons who are not related by blood or marriage. Was what you were defining as family, and that didn't meet the state requirements because you were limiting the numbers. So I recreated it down below and we'll get to that in just a second. The other one that got modified was the mobile manufactured home. I've updated that to meet the new RCW requirements. I think before you were saying that it had to be manufactured before a certain date. You had a 5-year limit on the age. So RCW 3521 instead cites a standard that says they have to meet this certification level. So I've modified that definition to meet the new state requirements. And then I think we're done with the ones that I had in line, the ones that are all the way down at the bottom. Starting with family, and this is on page, should be 66 of 66. We'll have to work these in, but I just tagged them on here at the bottom so you can see the ones that I'm defining and adding. So the family is any number of persons living together in a dwelling unit and sharing living accommodations. That's the state definition of family. Again, we can develop our own and see if we get pushback. We can refuse to change what we have now and see if it gets picked up or noticed, but
And we'll be on the news too if we try. to-
There'll be protests down there.
you may be on both the so that's
Good idea.
So then there were a number of additional definitions for housing compliance. We're defining permanent supportive housing, because you all asked what that means. So, and then we're defining transitional housing, indoor emergency shelter and housing, co-living housing. We're also defining townhouse and cottage housing. And we're also, if we were served by fixed route transit, we would also have to allow parking reductions for some of the single family, multifamily type housing, but we're not served by fixed route transit. So I haven't included any of those edits. So I just added that note here at the bottom. So that note won't be part of code. That's just a note to remind me to talk about it tonight. So if you all think that those definitions look like there's something that we can live with, again, I tried to craft those as closely as I could to what's required by the state. But certainly we have flexibility. I mean, it's only up to what the reviewers pick up on when it goes through across their desk, so they will likely check these because they're noted in our checklist for state compliance with this update.
I don't have any issues with it.
Okay,
I only have curiosities, but no problems.
I think by the time that some of those issues become relevant, we will be out in our UGA when we'll actually be.
redevelopment pressure downtown, and then some of these may become more of an issue for you in your neighborhoods. I mean, the areas where you're most sensitive, the areas that we were sensitive about when we adopted new zoning, we talked about where those zoning
Right.
boundaries were. Those are gonna receive development pressure too. I mean, that's something that's a reality. As your urban growth area starts to develop, there are going to be developers and even individuals that wanna try to move in downtown and do things down here. The downtown core is a energetic and
Yeah.
yeah, we can do what we can in the zoning code to try and protect and preserve what you have and not change it much, but the state keeps changing the regulations and requiring us to do more, like allowing ADUs. So even in our downtown zone, we have to allow ADUs. So that's part of the reality of what it is. So were there any other questions or comments? So your curiosities, Commissioner Hill, if you want to discuss those, I can do my best to answer them.
No, it really is, I don't have. Well, I don't have any problem, especially if the state says. That's what we do, well, they take care of it. They say,
You're gonna bark up a tree.
And I don't think, at least the way I look at it now, I don't think anything here is worth fighting about, or the problems that might come along with it, the exposure in the newspapers and the.
Not a hill to die on,
protesters
eh?
outside, no deal breakers here.
Well, as I said, I tried to be not aggressive, but minimalistic in my approach to the definitions, so. They should go through the review and approval, okay, but yet they're no more than what they need to be. But they could be. Our schedule. And I think this time I had. To know when he might be bringing his draft back.
No,
Meeting,
So the plan is to have that missing section in front of Park Board on the 8th. And get them to say they're good with it and then bring it to you.
so with that, and we have the schools already. Did you all want to look at, I mean, the school's not gonna change theirs, we're just adopting it by reference. So, but I don't think they're gonna, they haven't stepped forward with a willingness to do a lot of extra work to try and make it into this process, so,
It's their loss, right?
it is.
It's their loss, it's not. The
It's
city,
not the city's loss, yeah,
the school district's loss, and it is a shame, but.
it is a shame. And develop what needs to be developed if they decide they want to do that. But the goal is still to try and get parks and fire in there now. I don't know if we're gonna make it with traffic either to get traffic impact fees, because Mike had offered that when he gave his presentation in his memo. But there's not enough information developed in there, and I think he didn't have that in his scope and budget to develop impact fees, so. So we might have to come back later and hit traffic and schools and only adopt parks and fire with this update.
I would imagine when it becomes more of a reality. I mean, right now, we know, yeah, this kind of thing, we will have to address it, but
Well, so far we have a traffic study that says Callis Meadows is really not impacting anything, and that's all we have.
Well, he did prepare his memo with looking at the planned growth, but
Right.
the problem with that is we don't have the area in our urban growth boundary to accommodate that growth, so it
Right.
didn't look at a lot of intersections. So
But-
he was limited by the scope of our expansion. We can't necessarily look at the urban reserve area for purposes of collecting impact fees. It's not, you can't do that, so. For water and sewer planning, he is using that urban reserve area to do expansions and water rights planning and all that stuff, so it helps us in some ways at this point, but not as much as we'd like for traffic, so I think to set aside traffic impact fees is maybe okay for now. And then schools, it's a shame, but I don't see any alternative to that. And then maybe either Rachel or I could reach out to the fire chief and figure out if he can come back to us sometime in the next couple months and with his further develop, because his plan was pretty well developed. He just didn't have the impact fee stuff in there, so.
Yeah, I'll get with him.
And then Parks is coming back.
And they're not really gonna have impact fees developed either, are they? Based on,
So I'm putting together, a more detailed cost assessment of all the projects in that comp plan. And then based on what Todd and Eric worked on regarding how many roofs are projected, I'll come up with a proposed impact fee.
okay,
So, anybody have? I was thinking that we would try to get. I mean, the land development code's coming together pretty well. We just have habitat to get through. I mean, we've got the wetlands pieces and most of the critical areas pieces that we've been through for the code sections. We have, I believe, all the required comp plan elements that have been developed now, so I think at this point, it's just finishing up a few of these pieces. And I was thinking we target maybe a July. So I'll try to get a SEPA draft out. It's got a 60-day review. It's got to go through with Commerce before council takes action on it. So that'll be, that'll likely be September, October, and then that'll allow council to adopt it in November before the December 31st deadline.
So it needs a public hearing at planning commission or just a final review from planning?
It will be a public hearing.
Okay.
That's why I think I have to get SEPA done.
Or before the public hearing?
Before the public hearing.
Okay.
But I don't want to send that draft out for the 60-day review until planning commission at least has blessed it. Because the 60 days is a notice of intent to adopt. So that's the city saying we intend to adopt this. You have 60 days to give us your comments. So we.
So a final a final planning commission meeting, then SEPA, then the public hearing.
SEPA, planning commission hearing. And then 60-day notice. And then council hearing and adoption.
Got it.
so what do you wanna do for next meeting?
So next meeting will be Habitat.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I couldn't bring Habitat back to this meeting. Our habitat biologist was ill for a week and that took her out of the mix and caused us to kind of shuffle things up. We were supposed to talk about habitat tonight, but instead we just pulled these other elements up and so next meeting will be Habitat and then that'll be July, we probably will have to schedule another meeting. That'll be the June meeting. We'll probably have to schedule another special meeting, either late June or sometime in July in order to get to a public hearing in August, because we'll have to. I'd like you all to, just like we've been doing the 2 touches on everything else, so you've seen the wetlands, you'll get the wetlands. That's what we said. And then I'll compile it all for the hearing into the land development code.
How long of a window does the public get to review the plan before the hearing?
Well, that's why,
2 weeks.
SEPA, so they'll get 2 weeks before the planning commission hearing, but the record actually stays open through the close of the planning commission hearing. And then they can submit comments to council.
Okay.
So they'll get 2 weeks. And then if they don't like what planning commission does, then they can start submitting their comments to council during this. And then council hearing, which will accept also public comments.
And if we can get the shoreline information, that could also fall.
Ready to adopt, then we can adopt that with our critical areas.
Okay,
update.
I think it is. I'll call them.
Did I drop the ball on that one?
Yeah, that's okay. I can call them. Because I see it's gone through every step. It had a public hearing. It was approved by council. I just don't think it got sent. And that was in October of 22, I think. So it looks like November, it should have been sent back to Department of Ecology. And that just didn't get done. So if that's the last step there after the public hearing, it just wasn't adopted by then, because they sent back their revised draft. And so I think that final revised draft just needed to go back to Department of Ecology, and it never did.
Well, that's an important thing, that because then they issue you a letter telling you what needs to
Right,
change.
and that's the only thing I don't have.
That letter that says,
Well,
we accept this, but you gotta. About what we're gonna
So,
change it.
it went through council and he actually came out, and there was a meeting at council where I forget what his name is, but he was from Gray and Osborne, Tim.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so he came out and he actually did a presentation and went over the reviews of what needed to be changed. So those revisions came from by council.
On that, did we find that? I think we did. I think we found.
I think that's what we were gonna find out if it was done. We were billed for it. I know that we were
Yeah,
billed for
I
it
think
through
we
Gray and
found through
Osborne.
SEPA, but we didn't find the ecology letter of acceptance.
Correct. So that's why I think the final revised copy just didn't get sent in. Because that would have been done and then they would have sent us the accept.
In Kalama, it took them about. Once we had made it, we had been working with ecology throughout the shorelines update. And once we made it to the point where council had approved a draft for transmission to ecology by resolution, we transmitted that. That took them about 3.5 months, 4 months to get back to us with a letter of acceptance with changes still.
Pre-Rachel.
That was pre me, yeah.
So I'm less than optimistic that we'll be able to get through this process in time, but it's not a big deal if we don't. Because we can just adopt it by ordinance.
Right.
We can make all the changes that ecology suggests and adopt it by ordinance and have it done.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we get it done because I think we paid, we had a grant for it. Is there someone that I should contact or a department that I should contact over there? If ecology?
That's why I delayed, because our shorelines person, you'll work with the same shorelines person that I'm working with up in Chehalis. And she was out. I'm trying to remember her name, but I can send that to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'll call them tomorrow and I'll just send over everything I have and see kind of what they have and
She
then.
was out and then I dropped the ball and forgot to keep following up with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it went to my bottom of my stack too, so it's okay.
Well, and I think it's okay if it does, because I don't believe, I mean, it needs to get done, but I don't think that the timing is gonna line up with this. Unless
Right.
Yeah, then we're done. We could include it in here and council could just adopt it with all the ecology.
I mean, is that possible? Would it be posted somewhere? Because,
It
If we
would,
didn't return it, how could they?
the letters of acceptance, I don't believe. Are,
cause it was like 2017, so, and those are like the stacks of boxes that I'm still going through. So it could have been done and they didn't really put stuff on the computer, it was all in
and in
files.
2017, your shorelines planner wasn't the planner that's there today.
Yeah,
They've had turnover there quite a bit in the last few
Yeah.
years. We went through 2 or 3 shorelines planners in Kalama.
right, but if it is done, then it's already done and we just need to, we've already got it.
It's just a matter of finding it
Okay,
and tracking it down. And the ecology will struggle with the same, because they've had transition of people too, so they'll try to figure out where it was and they'll be helpful, but it's the same pickle we're in. Nobody was here when it was done.
yeah,
Nobody seems to know. Well, thank you all. I appreciate that.
Before we conclude, I'm just curious, when I'm looking at the regulations, it's talking about the urban growth area having the 2 ADUs per lot. Does that also apply to the city part, to the small lots inside downtown? Cause I was just looking at this. Growth areas.
That is interesting. Certainly that's not the way it's being applied.
So I don't know if maybe that, it's just talking about the expansion. Is that worth finding out? Cause you're saying the minimum ADU size is 1,000 square feet, for example, things like that, it just sounds like they're thinking about the urban growth area.
Well. Yes, something isn't quite right. with
Okay,
that.
okay.
It was, I'd go back to that, we could pull it up and look and see. I will double check to make sure that we're required to allow ADUs.
Just the 2 per lot, that's all I was looking.
2 per lot?
And when I looked at the state requirements, they just mentioned specifically must be allowed in the urban growth areas.
I
But I don't know why it specifies it.
I think that must be inclusive of city limits, because I don't
That
understand.
sounds like they're just including the urban growth in the city.
Well,
Don't forget
but the
that-
urban growth area isn't even regulated by a city.
No, by county.
It's regulated by the county. It's outside of your jurisdiction. So it would have absolutely no impact on cities, and that's
Unless we had
not true.
yeah.
Well, unless we had an
If it only applied in UGAs, then no city would be impacted by that, because cities have UGAs, but they don't
but if
regulate.
we had
their
an ILA
UGAs.
with a county, then it would apply, would it not?
Well, you get to regulate it then, so then your standards would apply, but then when you didn't have standards, the county standards would apply.
yeah, I think bringing the ADUs back, once we're done with the comp plan would be good.
What's that?
Bringing the ADUs stuff back, once the comp plan's done, you guys can hash that out.
Well, we'll need some more things to have fun with.
Yep.
zoning.
Indeed, next, we look forward in 26.
Yep,
Well, before we close the meeting, is there any public comment? I see a negative, so take a motion to adjourn.
We'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
We are adjourned.